Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Liam Sinclair. I'm the Executive Director here at the Dance Theatre, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to what we hope will be a really special evening as part of our anniversary season. To put tonight into a bit of context for you, the Rep has 3 special birthdays. Not content with one, we've got 3 special birthdays this year. First of all, Dundee Repertory Theatre turns 80 in September this year, and we'll be marking... Yes, I think we'll be marking that with a series of events throughout the next year. And also Dundee Rep Ensemble, Scotland's only permanent ensemble of actors, turns 20 this year. Should we give it? Finally, our enterprise projects, which works with local young people and engages them in a series of creative experiences, turns 10 this year. So we've got 8 to 20 and 10. In a few short weeks' time, we're going to be launching our anniversary season, which is, the theme for the season is Dundee stories with a universality and an ability to stretch beyond Dundee. But in amongst all of that, in amongst all our anniversary shows, if you like, we want to hear about your stories of Dundee Rep Theatre. So we've been beginning a campaign of getting you to tell us what Dundee Rep Theatre and all the work that it does has meant to you all over the years. We've had coffee mornings so far. We've had people literally bringing in boxes of programmes from the loft that they've rediscovered. There's a whole lot of content on our web pages and on our social media feeds. There's an email address, dundeerep at dundeereptheatre.co.uk, but you'll get all that on our website. So get involved in telling us stories. Tonight is about one very special person's story and their relationship with Dundee and Dundee Rep. I'm not going to say much more by way of introduction because we needed somebody to kind of host that storytelling tonight, and who better than Janice Forsyth. Janice, throughout her career, has just taken great care and dedication in helping Scotland's fantastic art scene tell its story, and she just felt like the perfect person to host this evening, and we were delighted when she said yes. So as for your first welcome tonight, please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to Janice Forsyth.
I was basically a 21st century Lavinia Dermond, for those of a certain age. Oh, a young audience in tonight, fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Liam. As Liam said, yes, over the next wee while, not tonight, but in the next few months, we do really want to hear so many of your stories, and we know there are lots of stories out there. Tonight isn't just about me chatting to our esteemed guests, we also want to hear from you guys too. Are you up for some questions? Yeah. Come on, you're a bit livelier than that. Brian Cox is in the wings. So lots of really interesting questions for Brian Cox. Yes. That's the right answer. Well done. Keep up the energy levels, ladies and gentlemen. No, I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. I'm from Glasgow. Get to Dundee as often as I can, not as often as I would like. And I've seen just so many superb productions here, and I think this really is, and I'm not just saying it because I'm here, but it really is Dundee Rep, the jewel in the crown of Scotland's theatres. The ensemble just doing extraordinary work year on year, and great to see a constant injection of new talent to everything from being on stage, the actors, the musicians and so on, but also backstage staff and designers too. So let's hear it for Dundee Rep. Absolutely superb. Notes here because Brian Cox has done a lot of stuff, but don't worry, we won't go on too long. But this is such an amazing story because this is where it all began for Brian Cox, not this building, as some of you might know, but Dundee Rep, and what a hugely, extraordinarily versatile star of stage, wee screen and large screen he is. I mean, how many actors can you think of who played both Winston Churchill and Hermann Goering? You know what I'm saying? He can do it all. Obviously appeared in Scottish films, including Braveheart and Rob Roy, as well as all those blockbusters. Give us a cheer if any of your favourites are here. X-Men, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, the Bourne franchise. And lots of small screen appearances. Too many to mention. A particular highlight of mine, playing Daphne Moon's dad in Frasier. And coming right up to date, he is burning up the screen in the HBO, the American series, where he plays a media magnate, Logan Roy, that is in the series Succession. Any of you seen that? Yeah. Yes, you guys are up to date, I love it. He's in great form, he's delighted to be back here tonight, ladies and gentlemen, so please give your biggest ever welcome, a big Dundee welcome for Brian Cox. Brian, I was in the restaurant where you were dining. I was going to complain about the noise coming from your table. A very lively family event. So you've got family in here tonight?
Yes, I got my ancient sister. Well, she's not really ancient. Well, you are ancient. You are, sorry. She is. And she's earned it too. My sister celebrated her 89th birthday last year. And she's very important to me because I lost my dad when I was 8, and my mum wasn't very well, and my sister was like a kind of, well, she was like my talisman. You know, she kind of took care of me. It was difficult for her because she lived in an apartment in, well, apartment. That's what we got to ask. And she lived in Kemback Street, and they knocked it down, which they should have done. And it was 5 families on one plenty, as it were, and a toilet between the lot of them. And she took me in.
2 toilets.
Pardon?
2 toilets.
Wait, I was 2 toilets, was it? If you want to come up here and come out. I warned you, didn't I? I warned you that you'd be doing this all night. And she was wonderful. She was wonderful to me, and she still is wonderful. And
even though she's heckling you.
Oh, she always heckles me. I'm used to it. No, but that was the beginning for me, and so I'm grateful to them.
And we'll go back to the beginning in a moment. But you've been in Scotland. Good timing, enjoying the good weather.
Yeah, fantastic.
So
I've been staying at my niece's in Aberfeldy, and it's stunning. I mean, why would you want to go anywhere else when it's like this? I mean, it's just amazing, absolutely amazing.
And tell us about the filming. You're coming up to date with Succession, because this is interesting. I haven't seen it because it's one of those fancy non-council channels.
We're filming. Its access is very difficult. It's on, I believe, Sky Atlantic here. It's HBO, home box office, back in the States. Same channel as Game of Thrones. And it's a kind of modern version of the Game of Thrones, really. And we're just doing we're about to start episode 7. We've done 6 so far. And we're doing 7 and 8 here. 7 is set in the south, but we're actually filming in the Glasgow area because they wanted to keep it in Scotland, which is good for Scotland, and I'm very pleased to be here. And the 8th episode is actually going to be set in Dundee. So there's a story attached there. When I started the show, and this was in 2016, we did the pilot then. I was, they rang me. I had one of these. The writer was in Italy and the director was in Los Angeles, and I was in London. So they rang me and they said, we want to do this show. And I said, great, fine. And they said, you play this character, Logan Roy, who's the head of a media company. So I said, oh, great. I said, well, I wouldn't mind playing it Scottish. And then the writer said, oh, no, he can't be Scottish. He mustn't be Scottish. But the director, who's called Adam McKay, or Mackay as we call it, he was very keen on the idea, so we left it at that, and they had me born in Quebec, Canada. And that was in the pilot. And when we got to episode 9, we were filming down in East Nor, in the Malvern area, in Herefordshire, and Gloucester, that sort of and up there, and we were filming away, and Peter Friedman, who plays one of my many executives who I keep firing and rehiring throughout the show, he said, "Oh, Brian, they've changed your birthplace." And I said, "What do you mean they've changed my birth? This is the 9th episode. They've changed your birthplace." And I said, "Where am I born now?" He said, "Oh, hang on, I'll check." And he went through his iPad, and he said, "Oh yeah, Dundee, Scotland." And I went, "What?" He said, "Dundee, Scotland. You're born in Dundee, Scotland." I said, "But nobody told me. This is the first time I've been told about this." And I went up to the writers and I said, "What do you mean now, Dundee, Scotland? What does that mean?" "Oh, we thought it'd be a little surprise."
So tell us about, I mean, you talked about, not the easiest of childhoods, and your father dying when you were just a wee nipper. You were just 8 years old. You're the youngest of what, 5 children? Five children. Yeah. And then there were problems with your mum as well.
My mum, she was very distressed after my father died, and she became quite suicidal. Actually, I came home one time, and I thought she was cleaning the oven. And I caught her and I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm cleaning the oven." I said, "Well, what's that smell of gas?" "Oh, I must have left it on," she said. And she turned it off, but it was very worrying. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't worried at the time. I was only worried later. Yeah. And but she had she was one of the first people she had a severe, very bad nervous breakdown, and she had electric shock treatment, and in those days it was very primitive. And she was she was small, but she was quite chunky, and she lost about 6 stone. And she became, I mean, she was always slightly eccentric, but she became really eccentric after that. She was quite funny, but it was difficult. Yeah. It was not easy.
And you talked about your lovely sister.
Well, my sister, my sisters, they all rallied round after my father died. Both my sisters, with their wonderful husbands. I have a sister who lives in the south, lives in Chester. They came up and they sort of rallied on the flat. But my mother was also very unstable, so it was very difficult for them. And I was like this observer at the feast, kind of watching all this from my perspective of being 8. And it was kind of weird in a way. It sort of developed in me this independent self, which in many ways it's a horrible thing to say, but I'm actually very grateful for it in the end. It sort of helped me grow up, maybe too soon, but in a way it was very kind of forming as for a person.
Because it's traumatic enough for the family, your father dying, but my understanding is that he had a grocer's shop and he'd maybe been too nice with the tech.
Well, he was very generous, my father. He had a shop which is now doesn't exist anymore in just off the Wellgate, in a place called Charles Street. Does anybody ever remember Charles Street? Yeah. So my dad's shop was there, and he had 2 shops actually. The first one, he got a second one, and he was quite a poor community, and he was a very, very loved man, and he gave a lot of credit to people, and of course, when he died, people didn't pay their bills, so it was a shock both to my mother because he had something like 10 quid in the bank. It was a pretty horrible situation, and he just opened a shop up in Blackshades, which my brother eventually worked in and ran. But so it was not an easy time,
And so it makes one wonder the transition then for you as a boy who ends up rocking up at the theatre, because you think in so many ways that would be unlikely, but we have to remember, apart from anything else, it was a huge cinema town back then, wasn't it?
Well, there was 21 cinemas in Dundee when I was a kid. And I think I visited every single one of them. I certainly used to spend all my time. I was always conning aunties out of 1 and 3 to go to pictures. And it was great. I mean, I had a wonderful time. It was also like my babysitter. I spent all my time in the cinema, but it kind of goes back earlier than that. The acting bug goes back to when I was probably when I was about 2 or 3. And my dad used to, we all know what New Year's like, but it was a big celebration. My mother would always be she always wore this red dressing gown. She'd be up making steak pie at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then I'd be brought in, and then I'd be made to do a turn, and my dad, and my speciality act was Jolson impersonations. I used to impersonate Al Jolson, you know, climb up on my knees, honey boy, all that stuff. And I would stand on the bunker, which was in our window where we kept the coal, and that was my first ever stage. And the curtains were there, and they'd draw the curtains, and I'd sing. And I thought, just like now, I thought, oh, this is good. This is not bad, I like this, I could live with this. So that was where I got the bug. Yeah. So I kind of knew then and there that, and now probably about 2 or 3 as I say, and I thought, this is what I want to do. And then going to the pictures sort of confirmed it.
Can you remember the kind of films that you particularly enjoyed at that point?
I loved, I mean, I loved I used to go to the Broadway on Saturday morning, so it was Captain Video was what's his name, you know, that you play every week. And I watched Captain Video, but then I was a huge Jerry Lewis fan. And that was Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, so I watched them. And then, of course, the actors, being Catholic, my mother insisted that I go and see Spencer Tracy. He was known as a big Catholic at the time. So I got into Spencer Tracy, and I still think he's probably, for me, the greatest screen actor there's ever been. Yeah. And I was very lucky to be introduced to him at that age. And then, of course, there was Marlon Brando, there was James Dean. And the Broadway and the Royal had double features. So you went at 6 o'clock at night, came out at 11 o'clock, you'd seen 2 movies. And they were twice weekly. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, there'd be double features. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, there'd be no double features. So you could see as many as 8 films in 1 week. And believe you me, I saw them all.
Yeah. And it's amazing the stats. Dundee, the 2nd largest cinema in Europe. Green's Playhouse, the other game.
Yeah. Well, the Green's Playhouse. Now, I would often play truant from school, plunk from school, and one of my things was I would be sent for errands by a school teacher, and I would forget to go back. So I would go off to the cinema. And one of the times was I went to see Giant, I think it was at Green's Playhouse, and I fell asleep. And
it is a long film.
It is a long film. And I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And my mother was in hospital, and my youngest, I have 3 sisters, and the youngest of them, Irene, she was only about 21 at the time. She was going mental because, you know, I'd disappeared. And I had to break out of the cinema because the cinema was all locked up. And I'd fallen asleep, you know, in between one of the chairs. And I got out, and I was in a panic, and I managed to break out of the cinema. And I was running along the high street, and there used to be a TARDIS, a police box on the corner there, just by the, you know, at the end of where the overgate and the nethergate used to meet, just near Boots the Chemist. There was a TARDIS there. And as I was running past, I heard this voice saying, "Where are you going, young man?" And I thought, what the hell is that? You know, and I looked up, and it was this big blue box speaking to me, and he said, and he didn't, there was no face, it was just his voice talking to me. "Where have you been?" I said, "Well, I went to the pictures." I said, "It's 4 o'clock in the morning. What do you mean you went to the pictures?" I said, "Well, I fell asleep." He said, "Well, we'll have to see about that." So he eventually emerged out of his box, and he took me along to the Greens, and anyway, I was fine. I got home, and it was okay. But my sister was furious.
Of course, of course. I mean, I love the idea of that. It's a full circle, because you become a movie star, and early on a seminal experience is breaking out of a cinema. And then also, were you in Doctor Who at any point?
No. Well, yeah. Well, that's another story. I was in Doctor Who by accident.
Right.
I played a nude on a nude. I can't remember what it is.
An ood, not a nude.
I played. He had a lot of
gilded tentacles.
Yeah, that's it. But I thought I misunderstood what was happening. My agent said they wanted to do, and I thought it was an ad for Doctor Who. And I went along there to the studio, thinking I was doing this ad for Doctor Who. Yeah. But it turned out I was playing a part. An ood. And occasionally Doctor Who people will come up to me and say, "Can you sign this?" And I go, "That's not me. I'm not that. I'm not that."
I love it. I absolutely love it. And so I asked a lovely person, Rob Curry, one of the staff here, to have a wee rootle around in theatre programmes, which I think are now at the university archive. And I just thought some of these titles might bring back particular memories. But tell us, first of all, about, you talked about your love of acting and the love of being in the spotlight early on. What led you to the theatre?
Well, it was a funny, it was a great experience, actually. I mean, my education was a disaster. I mean, I was a complete washout. I was the untidiest, I still am, the untidiest person in the world. I mean, I'd get full marks for geography, but they'd take the lot off because they couldn't read the paper. And I ended up at St Michael's Junior Secondary School, which is now gone. They knocked it down. I think I had something to do with that. And what happened was I had these two guys. One was an English teacher called Bill Dewar, and there was another guy called George Hackett. Now, George was my registrar teacher, and he was this very cadaverous-looking guy, very thin, flaring nostrils, and they both really took care of me. They knew that my education was wrong, because I wasn't fit for any of the stuff that was going on. I mean, I remember I had to make a boat once, and it did not look like a boat. It was a disaster, and the tech guy said, "Oh, well, forget about it, Cox, never mind." So then Bill Dewar had started this thing called the Rep Club, and on a Wednesday afternoon, 4 o'clock, we used to get on a number 11 bus, and we'd come down to and the Rep was in Nicholl Street then. That was the first Rep. And we would go and watch the matinee. Now, I'd never seen live theatre. I mean, the theatre was very, it was a bit like that, you know. It was sort of hoi polloi. The people who used to go to the theatre, they used to call them the felties, because all the women wore these felt hats, and they were known as the felties. That's what the audience were known as. And I went along, and this was school kids, and we went to see these amazing matinees, and I hadn't really made the connection with live theatre. So I got involved, and as it happened, there was a guy called Frank McDermott who had been at my school a few years before me, and he had a job which he'd got into a drama school. He got into the Glasgow school, which was the ISMD, AMD in those days, and he got in there, and his position had become available. So I went down. Bill Dewar said, Frank's, because he knew Frank, he was his sort of mentor to Frank. He said, look, Frank's leaving. He said, and his job's going. He said, and I've talked to him about you. And he said, well, I'll get him an interview. So I thought, oh, this is great. I've got an interview. And I was only 14. I hadn't quite left the school. So I got on the bus and I went down. And it's funny because I went to the front. It's off, the original Rep is off Bell Street. It's in Nicholl Street, between Nicholl Street and Forrester Street. So I went to Nicholl Street, which I thought would be the front of the theatre. I thought that's how I'd get in. And the wifey on the box office says, where are you at? I said, I've come for an interview. She said, she said, that's at the front, and you've got to go in the back to get to the front. so she said, the office is at the front, but you have to go in the back. If you go in the back, you can then come to the front, and they'll let you in at the front. I said, oh, okay, fine. So I went round the back, but there was nobody to tell me. Well, she neglected to tell me there was nobody to tell me what to do when I got there. So I actually arrived, and as I climbed the stairs, all hell was breaking loose. And there were these two people knocking hell out of one of them. There was a punch-up, and I thought, this is a theatre? And these guys were... And it was an actor called Nicol Williamson, who could be particularly cantankerous and also particularly drunk. And it was 10 o'clock in the morning, and him and the stage manager, who was called Jeremy, I think Fry was his last name, they were having a barney, a sort of stand-up fight. And I thought, this is strange. And I was trying to get past them, because it was like a close at the back there. They were going up the stage door. So I was trying to get past the two of them. And finally, so I finally got past them, and there was a guy, an actor called Gordon Granger, and he was standing on the landing, on the first landing, and he was smoking. And he said to me, he said, are you all right, darling? And I thought, two guys are just not hell. And somebody's just called me darling. Well, this is clearly the place that I must be. So I went in for my interview, and I mean, talk about bullshit. I mean, I was a master of it, a total master of it. And the guy, who was a wonderful man called John Henderson, a New Zealand gentleman, who ran the theatre in those days, And he said to me, he said, interviewed me, he said, now tell me about classical music. I knew nothing about classical music, and I went, oh. And I remembered that the week before, we had a guy called Brad Cato, who was a music teacher at the school, and he had played the trumpet march from Aida. And I thought, oh, well, I love Aida. And John said, really? I said, yes. Yes, I do. I think Aida is one of the finest operas there are. I was 14. And I said, particularly the trumpet march. Absolutely. I think that's one of the great pieces of music. Now, he clearly knew I was bullshitting. But I got the job anyway.
Yeah. And do you think actually that is, as well as having talent and also behind so many great success stories, is a teacher, or teachers, as you have said as well?
Invaluable.
Yeah.
Invaluable. I mean, Bill died many, many years ago. But George Hackett has only just died, and he was in his 90s. He moved to Australia. He was a wonderful, wonderful man, and they took care of me at a distance. They were omnipresent, but they were never on my case. They were just there, and they were like two angels, just guarding me. They were like guardian angels, guiding me in a certain way, and both of them were wonderful. They were just wonderful.
And do you think also that sense of inner confidence, which perhaps again might be surprising given the circumstances surrounding you at that point, but that sense of self, it's like, I'm going to get this gig?
Well, they instilled it in me. They really did, the pair of them. They were great. You know, I did a little play. Somebody actually sent me it recently, which we did. We did a play at St. Michael's. It was actually an operetta. And I remember one of the lines was, "In the end of all the fuss is nothing less than us, an upright and official English jury." It was, I don't know why I saw that, but I just remembered that. That was one of the lines. And they just took care. They were really there. And Bill got me this interview, and I got this job. And if it wasn't for them, I don't think I would have ever been able to get into the theatre.
And I'm also wondering, as you continue in your career, because people might look at you and other actors and think, oh, they've got it easy, this, that, and the next thing. But the idea of going on at any kind of stage set or studio, and you're meeting new people and having to emote and all of that, I think it's incredibly tough. So that sense of self that you learned early on from those amazing mentors, I just wonder if you think that has been a key facet in maintaining a long career.
There are so many elements to it. I mean, certainly undeniably my background, which was pretty tragic and not 100% pleasant. I mean, I had a very happy childhood until my poor old man passed away. He was very young. He was only 51 when he died, my father. And so everything was really quite rosy. But after that, it was like a house of cards. It all collapsed. And we became really quite poor. My mother, she could not function properly, and she eventually worked as a cleaner down at the City Square in the education department. And then she also became a chalet maid at Butlins as well, which used to work. So it was a very fractured time, but my sense of self was throughout that, even before I met these two guys, and they confirmed me, was happening.
It was there. It was always there. Yeah. And what were your first jobs then, once you got the gig?
Well, I used to have to take the money to the bank in the morning, which was...
And you were 14?
Well, when I was 14, I just was backstage doing scene shifting. Right. And then because I was just before my 15th birthday. And when after my 15th birthday, there was a woman called Bunty Kidd. And Bunty, she was the secretary of the theatre, and I was her general factotum. So I went messages for Bunty Kidd, and I would take the money to the bank. That's what I did in the morning. I would take the tickets to there was a British Linen Bank, which was in the High Street, and I would go to the British Linen Bank, take the money, come home, come back to the theatre, work, and then in the evening, my task every night was to mop the stage. And I literally mopped the stage every night at 6 o'clock. I would get out there and with my mop and my brush, and I'd mop the stage. It was terrible, because you can't mop a stage. You get these white streaks all over the place, and I went nuts, and eventually I gave up and just did my best. And that was that. And then eventually they allowed me to go backstage, and eventually I became probably the worst stage manager that ever lived. Unbelievable things happened. I mean, like once, several incidents. There was several incidents, and one incident, like, I was very, for somebody so young, I was very full of myself. I was kind of used to look at these actors with sort of with great curiosity and slightly, critical, And I was watching. There was a play called Rollo, I think it was, and I was on the book, and I was sitting on the book, and of course they'd be away on page 12 or 20, and I was still on page 5, because I'd be watching them or I'd be daydreaming away. And suddenly I was sitting there, and the actress kind of went upstairs. She disappeared, and I thought, oh, where'd she go? What's going on here? And suddenly there was a tap on my shoulder, and I turned and she said, telephone. I said, for me? She said, no, on stage. And the other incident was we were doing The Merchant of Venice, and in those days there was curtains, none of this stuff. It was curtains, you had curtains, and you had a what they called a warmer, which was a warmer light which warmed the curtain. It was a red light. So you went house to a half, house out, warmer out, curtain up. So I'd go, and I'm doing all this announcing, house to a half, house lights out, house to a half, house lights out, warmer out, curtain up, and I went the curtain up. But on this particular night, they came on and they started, oh, in sooth, I don't know what, I'm so sad, where is you said, where are you? And then they started going for about, must have been about 2 minutes, and then suddenly one of them said, oh, the F word. And I went, and they said, you've left the iron in. And I'd left the iron curtain in, I'd forgotten to take it out. So they started acting, and suddenly they were just acting against the iron curtain. It was a disaster, an absolute disaster. And the worst incident was a stage manager was telling me what to do with a pistol, a gun, because there was a practical gun in this. And the thing was, he said, here's the gun. You hold it, you don't point it to the person, you always hold it by holding the barrel, handing them the gun. And you keep the thing open. And then when you've got it, you close it. But you hand it, close it. So I'm going, okay, and he was doing all this and handing it to me. And he went, I said, oh, you close it, and I went, bang! And I shot the end of his nose off. I mean, it was very, very traumatic.
Especially for him.
Well, I was. He did actually say, I've been shot. No, but I didn't shoot the end of it, I just burned the end of his nose.
So is all of this what hastened your entry to the other side?
Yes, well, I decided there was only one thing for me, was to be an actor. I couldn't do any of the other side of it, because it's hard work. And, these guys, they work really hard, and they're very skilled. I wasn't skilled.
So I'm told, detailed research, the 9th of October 1961, the Dover Road by A.A. Milne, your first ever public appearance as an actor?
Oh, God.
What?
Oh, dear.
What happened?
Oh. Well, we went to I think it was the Queen's Hotel. We went to learn how to do service, because I had to serve a meal.
Okay.
And I was playing Joseph, and I was playing a part that I was far too young for. He was a silent part. He was supposed to be an ex-boxer who worked as a manservant, and he did everything, all the general factotum duties in the play. And at one point, I had to serve this meal, and what happened was, I was up at the back like this, and my back was to the audience, and I was serving the fish, and I had a cream sauce, I was serving it in the dish, and then one of the fish fell on the floor, and I thought, so I put it on the plate, but the thing is, I got the white sauce all down the air. So I came over to serve the fish to the actor who was sitting there, and I went like that. and the white sauce were all over. And it just got worse and worse and worse. You know, and it was just, and they were so, they nearly fired me because of that, but some people found it quite funny.
Wow, I thought this was going to be a huge triumph.
No.
It's a learning curve.
No, they took a while to let me back on the stage again.
The next programme I find is The Merchant of Venice, 13th of March, 62. Brian Cox in cast.
Yes.
Did you have any lines to say?
No.
No.
I played Bassanio's servant. I may have had a line, but I can't remember.
Simple Spymen by John Chapman, 11th of February, 63. Brian Cox plays Corporal Flight.
Corporal Flight, yes, that was one of my triumphs. I can't remember it, but I know it was one of my triumphs.
Nothing went wrong. I've got two more here. Shaw's Pygmalion. Brian Cox plays a bystander.
Yeah.
You've been demoted at that point?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was the fill-in, you know, I was the fill-in boy for stuff. But I was very lucky to actually get that. I mean, that was an amazing opportunity. When you think about it now, it's quite incredible.
Yeah, and I wonder, you know, things have changed so much, obviously, but that kind of, especially at that age, I mean, you were literally learning the nuts and bolts.
Well, I was learning, I was particularly learning from the actors that I was working with, allowed me to work with them. And, you know, I was learning about, because I wanted to study, you know, and I was a Dundee, I thought, I take care. I couldn't speak, bread, I had to learn how to speak.
Yeah.
You know. I mean, I managed to do it on stage, but I was still, what do you want me to do? Want me to go to the butler? So, I mean, it was pretty horrendous, you know. My accent was, you know, the Dundee accent isn't necessarily the most attractive accent in the world. I had to learn. I was very lucky, actually, because towards the end of my time at Dundee, there was a guy called Bill Davis who ran the company, a Canadian guy, and he'd been at this school called LAMDA, and they were doing a production of Uncle Vanya, which I think I'm in there as well. I played the guy who brings on the drink for Astroff, and oh, my grateful. And what happened was that he said, would you like to come to a voice class? And I had no idea what a voice class was. And I said, well, what's that? He said, well, we've got somebody coming from LAMDA who's a colleague of ours, because they'd all been to LAMDA, and she's on her way north. She lived up in Wick. Our family lived in Wick. And there was a woman called Christian Linklater, and who probably was the premier voice teacher. She finally left. Well, what happened was that she came up, and I did this class with her, which I don't know what it was, but it was incredible. It was like it kind of opened up whole new vistas to me, and I thought, that's the school I want to go to. Yeah. So I was only 17, and I had a wonderful actress called Susan Williamson who helped me with my audition pieces, and I went down there, and I got into LAMDA, and they knew about me, and of course, blow me, but as soon as I arrived in LAMDA, Christian Linklater went to America, so I didn't work with her. Yeah. But she was the reason that I went to LAMDA.
And that's so interesting, because that's London in the 60s.
That's London in the 60s.
So at that point, you were quite happy to clear out and go somewhere.
Oh yeah, I mean, the thing was, it's such a weird thing about one's relationship to this town, you know. I mean, it's a complex relationship. I think we'll probably all feel that, actually. And I remember when I was a wee boy, I used to, you know, I lived in a place called Brown Constable Street, which is where I was born. And I would come up the close, and I would look, and I would see the Tay. And I always had this thing that I'm going to get across that water. I'm going to go somewhere. And I think it's a kind of nomadic thing that's in the Scottish nature. And I was determined to go. And of course, London was the 60s. It was an amazing time. And it was a fantastic, and LAMDA was like, it was a haven for me, an absolute haven, you know, so I was absolutely very excited by it.
And was London swinging? Were you swinging?
It wasn't swinging in 63, it became swinging a little later on.
Swinging-ish.
Swinging-ish, yes. I wasn't really, I mean, I was very innocent, you know, I was kind of, you know, I mean, also, I wasn't into, you know, I was the Withnail generation, but because I had my family situation, I was very square. I wasn't about being wild and drunken and all that stuff. I was very serious about what I was doing because I'd had such a crazy childhood. And it was kind of weird. I wanted some kind of stability.
Yeah.
And the drama school did give me a certain amount of stability.
And it's true also with what you were talking about earlier about Dundee Rep. I think anyone who's worked in the theatre knows it is like an alternative family.
Yeah, that's right.
Best,
yeah, well, that was what was so. You know, I mean, the theatre burnt down. The theatre in Nicholl Street burnt down on my birthday.
Nothing to do with your cake.
Nothing to do with my cake. No, nothing to do with that. No. It was June the 1st, 1963, and it was one of the saddest days of my life. I mean, I tried to get in the theatre. The fire brigade wouldn't let me in, and because I used to sleep in the Rep. I used to sleep under the stage. You know, sometimes I would go home and just slept there. And it was my life. It was my world, and it was just the best thing ever for me. You know? And it was a very sad day.
Yeah. You forged a career in theatre after leaving Lambda, not least the Edinburgh Lyceum Company, mid-60s, I think, 1965, and then a couple of years at Birmingham Rep. Parts including title role in Peer Gynt in '67. That's a biggie.
Well, you know, this is what is so sad. You know, to be serious for a moment, is I was very lucky because there was such amazing structure. I mean, there were functioning. I mean, this is why this place is so extraordinary, because it's still a functioning full ensemble. You know, it was an ensemble it only wasn't an ensemble for about 10 years. But there was always an ensemble at Dundee, right through the 60s into the early 70s. And then Hamish Glenn reintroduced it 20 years ago. But that kind of work, that for me, the structure of everything, you know, my first year was spent at the Lyceum in Edinburgh, working for the wonderful Tom Fleming. And he had a very ambitious plan, and he was very let down by the City Fathers of Edinburgh, who were very conservative and square. And he lost heart with it, which was a tragedy. And then I went to Birmingham Rep. Now, Birmingham had been the Rep where Albert Finney had been, Derek Jacobi had been, Paul Schofield had been, Laurence Olivier had been, had an incredible pedigree. And when I arrived there, it was run by this amazing Yorkshireman called Peter Dews, who talked like that. "You're all right, Louis." And so I joined this company. And within the space of 2 years, I played Orlando, Bolingbroke, Peer Gynt, Iago, and Mercutio. And I wasn't even 22 by the time I'd done it. So it was an incredible, I mean, it was terrible in all of them, but it was an incredible learning curve for me. And I feel sorry for young actors now because they don't get that kind of experience. They haven't got access to it in the same way. And I think it's such a great shame because that's how I learned my job.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, because you fail, but you learn through your failures.
How were you at learning lines?
I wasn't too bad. I'm not, you know, touch wood. Corey, I'm not doing too bad. My assistant's there, so thank you.
Very well.
And, you know, I've always been good about learning lines.
Yeah.
You know, I'm lazy, you see, so I have to counterpoint my laziness by putting the effort in.
Yeah. It was interesting just to track your career through the 60s because, amongst other things, you played the Edinburgh Festival for the first time in the Ibsen play, When We Dead Awaken, that was 68. The following year with the Scottish Actors Company at the Lyceum, a version of The Wild Duck, directed by Fulton Mackay, which was then adapted for television. What was he like to work with?
Oh, well, Fulton is a major man in my life. He was my spiritual dad for a good 20 odd years. He was wonderful. He was absolutely wonderful. He was a great director. He was a great actor. Very much. I mean, you see him now as Mackay in Porridge, and it's wonderful to see him because he's brilliant in that. But his range was far greater than that.
And another one who died far too young.
Far too young, and he was from Clydebank. He'd started life as a quantity surveyor, which was what he did, and he was very funny, and he was very, very accurate about the work. I remember we did a television. We did a version of The Master of Ballantrae, and we did it, and he kept saying, Brian. He had these stiff knees, he used to stand like that. He said, Brian. He said, you know, the thing is, it's French. It's French. You've got to be French. You've got to be really French in this part. It's a French. It wasn't French at all. You've got to be French. You've got to act like French. You've got to act like a Frenchman. He said, that's what you do. That's how the part will work. It's Frenchman. So we did the first episode came out, and I was waiting for the phone call from Fulton, and the phone never came. So I thought, oh, so I better ring him. So I rang him. I said, Fulton. He said, aye. I said, so what did you think? I said, oh. I said, but, you know, was I French? He said, you were too bloody French.
Oh, I love that. That's fantastic. It's interesting just tracking the career 60s and 70s because there's a combination of theatre and television. And your first TV appearance, an episode of the Wednesday play.
Oh yeah, that was my first job. That was with...
65.
Yeah, that was when I was still a drama student. I got that job. It was with the great Jimmy McTaggart who produced it, and it was written by Alan Sharp and Green Tree and Garrett, who also subsequently, I worked with many years later, he wrote Rob Roy. And I was terrible in this cast. I played a Glaswegian. My Glasgow accent is not the best. And
was this the era of live? Was this live?
Well, it was no. It wasn't live. It was recorded, and then you did pickups. Right. But it wasn't. You did it like a live drama. Yeah. And I had to play this guy who threatens Paul. It was Paul Young playing the main character, and it was my first telly. It was great. Do you remember how that felt? Being in front of the camera? I just felt natural, you know. I felt completely at home. Various
TV roles follow. You played Henry II, the BBC Two drama series The Devil's Crown, 1978.
Which my boy was in.
Aha.
Yeah, he was in. He played a very young king, or prince. He played a young prince.
A wee prince.
Yeah.
And then you absolutely forged a reputation. I mean, huge name. In British theatre with seasons at the Royal Shakespeare Company and the National Theatre in the 80s and 90s, including, of course, playing King Lear at the RSC.
No, I played King Lear at the National. I always get that wrong.
Sorry, Titus Andronicus. Where was that?
Titus Andronicus was the key one. I did that.
Yeah, you won the Olivier.
Yeah, I won the Olivier. I did that at the RSC, and that was great. I was working with Deborah Warner, who was
amazing. She was an amazing director.
Yeah, she was amazing.
Yeah.
First big thing, actually.
And so how do we fit in? I mean, everybody talks about when it comes to your film career, because 86, the Michael Mann film Manhunter, which is a hugely influential thriller, although it wasn't a box office smash by any means, was it?
There was a lot of problems with that film. I mean, one of the big problems was the fact that it was produced by Dino De Laurentiis. And he produced it at Wilmington, which was in a place in North Carolina, but it was a film studio that he happened to build. Well, it was there, but it was in a hurricane zone, which was unfortunate to say the least. And there wasn't a hurricane when we were working in it, but he went bust. And so that film lay in escrow for a long time. It opened to phenomenal reviews. Yeah. And I got the film because I was doing 2 plays in New York. I did a play called Rat in the Skull, which I also won an award for, and we brought it to the Public Theatre. And then previous to that, I did Strange Interlude with Glenda Jackson, and I did that, and I got a bit of a reputation, so I went for an audition for Manhunter, and this wonderful woman called Bonnie Timmerman, who got me the audition. She was the casting director, and she's very eccentric, and so I arrived at the audition, and she said, do you mind, this was the weirdest thing, she said, do you mind turning your back? I said, what? She said, could you turn your back? I don't want to see you. I said, I just want to hear your voice. And I said, well, why? She said, well, when I came to the theatre to see you, I was in a bad seat and I couldn't see you because I could only hear your voice. But your voice had such an effect on me, so I did this audition, which was a strange audition. And I literally auditioned for Hannibal Lecter with my back to the camera. I mean, I kind of looked over like that, but that was about it.
I read the other names that had been discussed for the role of Hannibal Lecter, including John Lithgow. Yeah. What happened to these people? I don't know. Yeah. John Lithgow, Mandy Patinkin, and Brian Dennehy.
Brian Dennehy, and Kevin Kline. Oh no, Kevin was asked to play the other role, but he turned it down.
Yeah.
He said it's scary.
And you were, I believe, you took some inspiration from Peter Manuel?
Well, when I was a wee boy, I was obsessed in the late 50s with Peter Manuel. I mean, he just... Yeah, I mean, this Glasgow serial, before the word serial killer ever was. And I remember there was this forbidden paper which we were not supposed to read called the Sunday Pictorial. And I remember there was a whole thing in the Sunday Pictorial about Manuel, and I got really obsessed by him. And he was a little guy born in Portugal. Well, actually, he was born in America of a Portuguese family, but had come to Scotland. And his brother, actually, for a long time, used to sell papers on Buchanan Street by the station. And he was just this amazing guy. And he actually conducted his own defense. And he nearly got off, because there was the Watts, and there was this guy Watts who was having an affair, and he nearly framed him. Yeah. But then he did the smart. I mean, he was amazing, a horrible guy. But he was also very mundane, so he became quite a strong influence for Hannibal.
Denise Miner's written a terrific book looking at Peter Manuel.
Oh, really?
So it's almost a hybrid of fact and fiction called The Long Drop, which I recommend for you. I mean, that was amazing, because everyone talks about that film, but your film career didn't really take off until later, and I think that was due to you kind of putting it off.
Well, I put it off. I mean, I was going through a difficult time at that time, and I realized I couldn't pursue in the way I would like to pursue. I really had to come home, because I'd been in America for a long time, and I think it'd been tough on my, I think it was tough. Yeah. And it turned out to be pretty tough. And I decided that I needed stability, so that's when I joined the RSC. And I kept getting people saying, oh, you've got to go, you've got to come. And I said, no, I mean, I was dying to go, but I knew that I just had to stay still. So I joined the RSC and really started doing really a lot of good classical work. And it's such a funny thing about being an actor in this country. Well, it doesn't really matter now, but in those days, there was this kind of, as I talked about, there was a structure, but there was the thing of doing, doing the theatre, and then you may go on to do movies, but the theatre was the kind of thing. That's the sort of bottom line of our culture. We're not a cinema culture. And I have my own feelings about that, but we're not a cinema culture. We make great films, but it's not what we do. Television, of course, was a different thing. So I used to go from television to the theatre with no bother. And I decided that in the 90s that I would, after I'd done all this amazing theatre work, and it was fantastic, but I was very itchy, and I didn't want to become a certain kind of actor that is very predictable about being a kind of lovey. I think that was my big fear, And, I mean, I think that's a nonsense anyway, but I didn't, for the want of a better word, that's not the kind of person I wanted to become. So I really decided that I was 50, I decided I wanted to go to America and really start doing movies. Because movies had been my love, my initial love. And I decided that's what I really wanted to do. And there'd been a long gap, because as you say, I did Man Up in 86. Yeah. And it wasn't until the mid-90s. It was after the two films here that
But you built up, as I say, a huge reputation as a theatre actor and winning awards. Despite that, though, I mean, making that move at the age of 50, again, did you have to sort of take the big bravery pill, or were you feeling pretty confident about it?
Well, it's always. I mean, I think it's important to, if you can, in times in your career, you have to reinvent yourself. You really have to take yourself by the scruff of the neck and shake yourself up and do something different. And I think it's also part of the job. It's part of the appeal of what we do. It's what I love about my job. I really love that. The risk factor. There's always the risk factor, and it was quite good because of to do that at that time, because I had done everything in the theatre and I could see it. And I used to do. And I think television in the 90s was really horrible. It really was not good, and it was not something that you wanted to be. I didn't particularly want to do, because up until then, Devil's Crown, doing stuff, I always was able to go between the theatre and television. Yeah. But I always had this burning thing that I wanted to do movies, and I never realised what I wanted to realise, because I got caught up in, peer pressure group, all that stuff. So I then finally, nearly in my 50th year, just before my 50th year, I decided I'm going to go. I'm going to go to the cinema. I'm going to go to, and it happened very weirdly because I was actually co-producing a series of acting masterclasses in Glasgow, and with Richard Wilson, Prunella Scales, and I think in the end it was Jack Shepherd. It was supposed to be Robert Lindsay, but he bowed out, so it was Jack Shepherd. And I spent the end of '95 in LA, which was pretty miserable, but I spent it there going for meetings. And I had a few meetings with Rennie Harlan, Andrew Davis, a few people that, saw me about future work. Then I went back to England, and we fixed up with John Archer these series of masterclasses, which I sort of co-produced and put together the format. And Prue did hers, and Richard did the second one. And it was the weirdest thing because it happened at the same spot, at the same time, the same spot. I was in London Airport, I was at Heathrow. I was about to get on a plane to go up to Scotland. It was a Thursday morning. And I got this call from my American manager saying, they want you to fly out this weekend to Toronto to take over from, it wasn't take over, this is how they describe it. Dustin Hoffman is a no-show for this film, The Longest From Night. No wonder it was a no-show, it wasn't that great a part, but anyway. So I said, oh, okay. So then they would like you to fly out. And they start filming on Monday, and this was Thursday, so I got Friday. So I flew out, and they threw a costume on me, and they gave me a script, and I filmed for 10 days. Then I came back, and I was doing exactly the same with Richard Wilson's masterclass. I was at the same point in Heathrow, and the telephone went again, and it was a Thursday. And they said to me, Tommy Lee Jones has just walked off this movie called Chain Reaction, and they would like you to take over from him. So can you fly out tomorrow? So I flew out, and it was kind of crazy because the guy said the director was very eccentric, and the film had been a disaster, kind of was a disaster. And they said, we want you to take over the role, and I said, okay. So I said, so where's the script? And they said, there's only the Tommy Lee Jones script. I said, well, they said, oh no, we're not doing that script anymore. I said, oh, okay. So we did this strange rehearsal where it was bizarre. He said, these are the beats. There wasn't even writing. It just said, this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens. And that was what we did. And then they said, and we'll give you the script tonight, like the night before we did it. And that was the way it was. So I worked on that. And I suddenly saw that, and there was a couple of other things in the future. I thought, I think it's time that I made the move. And I did. I made the move to LA in the spring of '96.
You seem to be one of the most prolific actors around. I mean, I was just looking at Brian's IMDb, Internet Movie Database listings, and for 2019 and 20, it's like there are 9 projects or something like that.
That's all myth.
Is it? It's all just made up. But you do work incredibly hard. I mean,
well, I love my work, and my work is who I am. Well, it's not who I am, but it's part of who I am.
Yeah, and as you say, I mean, you like it, you're paid for doing it, and there's endless variety.
Yeah,
obviously.
I love the variety. I mean, I remember having a conversation with, because you get into it's not so much now, but it was about 20 years ago. You get into a situation with, I had a long conversation with Nigel Hawthorne. And Nigel had done a film with Sylvester Stallone, and we were on a plane together, and he was complaining about the fact that his part was very small, wasn't a big enough part. And I said, I really don't care. I said, anyway, I've just worked with Steven Seagal. So I said, put that in your pipe this morning. And so, you know, and he said, well, how can you? How can I said, very easy, it's a job, it's work, you know, I'll do it, you know, I mean, I'll go where the work is. And I don't have that grandiose idea that I'm this certain person, I can only do this certain part. And it was actually came from reading, there's a wonderful book by a biography of Michael Powell, the filmmaker Michael Powell. And it was a revelation to me when he wrote in his book, he said, in movies, there are no big parts and small parts. He said, there are only long parts and short parts. You're either on a movie for a couple of days or you're on a movie for forever. And I thought, and of course the day players are the people who work really hard because they have to come in and they have to make the mark in a day and they're done. So I thought, well, that's fine. And it's also, it is a kind of egalitarian art form, the cinema. It's not feudal like the theatre, as everybody in their place. Oh, you're there, you do that, you know, and all that's bollocks. And so I really felt, you know, I felt at ease with it. It felt it suited me. And because I had 50, I had no more, I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore, you know, what you do when you're young, and it's understandable. But I reached a point where I thought I could just do the work.
And it's interesting thinking about your mum loving Spencer Tracy, but it's that idea of that longevity. It's like you're not the leading man, you're the character actor, or however you would describe. How would you describe what you do?
Well, I think I'm a leading character actor. That's what I do. You didn't expect that, did you?
I like that.
I am. I mean, I'm very pleased with that situation because, and I've done very well out of it because all parts are characters, and you have to look at it like that. You know, and I've had great roles in that. And I mean, Manhunter was a great lesson because he's only on screen for 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's amazing.
You know, I mean, it's very powerful because of that, and it makes it. And I believe in that. That you know, you look at great people, great leading actors like Gary Cooper. You know, they never had lots of lines. They were just there. They were presences, and that's what the cinema does. You don't. I mean, in Succession, I love it when they don't have any lines because I could just sit and glower at people.
Yeah. And is there, you know, people always ask that, what do you prefer, the stage or the screen? But I'm just wondering, because you can do both so well, I'm just wondering, do you feel more at home with one or the other?
Well, yeah, I mean, no, I don't really. I enjoy them all. I mean, I enjoy the theatre. I mean, I feel, you know, that the theatre is where, the theatre does, you know, separate the men from the boys. There's no question about it. And
or the women from the girls
as well. I was talking about from my point of view. Didn't mean to offend, I'm sorry. Anyway, so I thought, well, look, the theatre is really still there. You know, I mean, my time, you know, is somewhat limited nowadays because it's all a big demand working in the theatre. But I love it, and I will do it. And you need to do it because you need to work those muscles. You know, and I'm feeling it now that I need to do something in the theatre because those muscles will begin to atrophy if I don't get doing something in the theatre.
I think one of the shows I most enjoyed you in plays, I mean, I love Waiting for Godot anyway, but it was you and Bill Patterson.
Well, that was one of the great things. I mean, working with Billy, I mean, was just, I mean, he's a great actor, you know, and it was just a joy to do that. And I think we did a damn fine production.
It was a terrific production, and also in a way it takes you back to cinema because we all, you know, Samuel Beckett was a huge fan of cinema and silent cinema and that kind of knockabout dual couple comedy, and you two were doing that perfectly together.
Yeah, well, Billy and I, we'd done, you know, we'd always popped up in movies and stuff like that, you know, playing doctors or detectives or whatever. And this was a fantastic opportunity to do something, you know, really, you know, of the best kind of material. Yeah. There's nothing better than Godot.
You also like, I mean, as well as those big films, big box office films, you also like to sort of take a bit of a chance and work with new talent, don't you? Well, both directors and actors.
Yeah, I really don't think it's a bit of a chance. I just think you have to do that. You have to work with the new kids on the block because it's an ongoing thing. And you young directors are very important. You know, it's very important that A, you work with them, and also B, that they work with you, you know, because there is an exchange goes on. And I've had a great time with young directors. I've had tremendous time, and a lot of them have gone on to bigger and better things. Yeah. And it's wonderful to see a director blossom, you know.
I mean, Spike Jones being
Spike Jones is fantastic. I mean, adaptation was one of the great jobs, you know. Thank you.
Indeed, and actually, as well as at the top of screen and stage, but you still keep a hand in with radio.
Yeah, I love it. It's my favourite medium.
Is it?
Oh, you don't have to put makeup on. And you didn't have to learn the lines. That's all.
That's true. That's why.
So I love radio.
That's why you get paid rubbish fees.
Well, I mean, it's a charity. It's working for charity. But I love it. I did this series called McLeavey, which we did. Thank you. Which I just adored, and working with Siobhan Redmond and the great David Ashton, who wrote it and was in it. It was just the best ever, and we had the best time. And we did that. We started that in 1999, and we only finished it in 2012. So it went on for a long time, and it was wonderful to do that. And the radio is just the best. It's the best.
Yeah. And then Bob, what's his name?
Bob Seven.
Bob Seven.
Bob Seven.
Forget the Spike Joneses and all that.
Bob
Just
Seven.
McLeavey and Bob
Dundee's
Seven.
own, Bob Seven. Actually, Broughty Ferry's own, but...
So that must have been interesting coming full circle.
Well,
because there were you getting the acting lessons and the voice coaching to take the Broughty Ferry and Dundee out of the boy, and then you have to get it back in.
I'm very, I get a wee bit annoyed. Sorry, I know you're Glaswegian, so I have to be very careful. I get very annoyed that everything in Scotland is always so West Coast orientated. Don't you agree? And what I love is that what I loved about, you see, in England, you but in Dundee, the humour is so much more surreal. It's kind of wacky, off the wall stuff. And it's very funny, when I read Bob Seven, I immediately thought of my dear late brother. My brother had a shop in Moneyfeith. He had a wee, it was a hole in the wall, which was fairly chaotic, and he was very eccentric, my brother. Because he would go in the shop and would say, and he'd say, "Oh, Hen, I haven't got any change." He said, "We hear cabbage." Hey, or some shrooms. Oh, shrooms. You want some shrooms? I'll eat some shrooms. So my brother did that. So Neil Forsyth, who wrote Bob Seven, I'd never met my brother.
Wow.
But people who knew Neil was convinced Bob Seven was based on my brother. It's kind of weird, but it's true. And of course, for me, it was like channeling my brother in a way.
I'm going to open this up now to our lovely audience for some questions.
Put the lights up.
The stage
All the lights are going.
Lights up, please. Oh, there are lots of you.
Lots of you.
Oh,
I thought it was just all these people down there.
and we have 2 roving microphones, so if you wave your arm in a question time way, except non-combative, I'll say this lady down here. Thank you very much indeed.
Hi, I know you're classically trained and you spent a lot of time with the Royal Shakespeare Company, and then you went to America and you work now even with a lot of method-trained actors. And
Pain in the arse, but never mind.
That was my question.
I mean, it's horses for courses, but some horses need to be put down. You know?
So when you're playing Winston Churchill, you don't stay in character?
Oh, for Christ's sake, no. No, it's acting, it's pretending, you know. I mean, it's all about, you know, you pretend. I mean, I'd go nuts if I did. I mean, Hannibal Lecter, come on, give us a break, you know. I mean, I've worked with these young actors, and they go through, and I keep saying, you know, it's not a religious experience. Just do the job, you know, it's fine, you know, you pretend. I mean, the best actors, if you ever want to see, I do there's a little video on YouTube. It's called Brian Cox's Masterclass with Theo. I don't know if anybody's seen it. And there's a wee boy, and he was 2.5. He lives in Drimmen. His dad lives in Drimmen. His dad's John Archer. And it was around Christmas time, and I noticed that he was quite verbal for a 2.5-year-old. So I decided to teach him Hamlet's to be or not to be. And he was amazing. He just did it. you know, but he was also distracted, so he would go off and he'd that is the question. And so I did this with him, and it was just wonderful to watch this kid really do it, pretend. And he did this great thing when I talked about the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. And he did it of his own volition. And I didn't say anything. He went, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. And I thought, that's his imagination working. That's a child really responding to something which is in the pulse of the text. And Shakespeare's great at that, because there's so much of it is about the rhythm and the pulse. And he just got it. And I want to go to the method classes and say, look, there's no research. No, he didn't go, I went out with my friends doing there's none of that. And I love that. I just love it. And I think, that's why I think children are the most natural and best actors. And I've worked with a lot of kids, and they're wonderful. I just am amazed with them. I worked with a little girl on a film recently, and she was incredible, and absolutely incredible. And they've got no, you know, they just go into it and come out of it. They don't have any of that sort of, it doesn't hang around. No, I mean, the method is fine. I can understand it. It's
Don't
helpful.
backpedal now, Brian.
No. All right, I'll leave it there.
Right, any other hands up? Are you seeing one that I'm not seeing? Oh yes, up here, thank you.
Hi there. You directed an episode of one of my favourite shows, HBO's prison drama Oz.
My God, you saw that?
I don't
have your name in the address, please.
So I was just wondering what, at that point in your career, what made you decide to step behind the camera, and is there any plans to do it again?
Well, there are actually. I want to make there's a film floating around now, which I can't want to talk about too much, but it's possibility that I might direct again. And unfortunately, I have to act in it as well. But you're supposed to laugh at that. But anyway, no, I love directing, but I don't want to, I mean, I like directing, but I don't like directors. It's not funny. I mean, some directors are wonderful. Now that's of course. But some directors are wonderful, but it's the power thing. You know, because I do believe it's a collaborative art. You know, I really do believe. And cinema's like that. There's so many elements to cinema, you know, that you have to take into account. And to do that show was just a joy, you know. I mean, I was panicking like mad. On the first morning, I was screaming at 7:15 saying, "We're behind!" You know, we don't start at 7 o'clock. You know. It was kind of nuts. But it was wonderful to do, and it was a great opportunity. And I have directed in the theatre, but it's tough. My son is an excellent director. He is really, really good director. And,
Has he ever directed you?
no.
Yeah.
You might do one day, I hope.
Great, thank you very much. We'll get a hand over here, and is there a mic over this side? Thank you. Oh, right beside you. He's behind you!
Please don't be shy. Ask me whatever you like.
Brian, is there anything that you regret doing throughout your life?
Resent.
Regret.
Or regret. I shouldn't regret, Rianne. You know, I think that's what it means. No, it means don't regret anything. That's what it means. So, no, I don't really have regrets in that sense. You know, there are uncomfortable experiences, and I have had a few of those in the work. But in the end, as my mother used to say, "What's for you will no go back." And I kind of carry that with me. You know, if it's meant, it's meant. So there's no point kind of grinning over and saying, "Oh, I shouldn't have done that." I don't really. I think that's a kind of blind alley, quite honestly, to be honest with you. So I don't really regret anything. I've had too good a time. I've enjoyed myself, you know. And you know, you can get so much out of the smallest thing. You know, it's just wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Lady dear?
Oh, you get better eyesight.
I know.
It's also got a better sense of direction.
Yeah, pass it on. There you go.
Since we're in the rep at this special time of the year, can you tell us a funny story about something that's happened to you in the Dundee rep during your career? Can you remember one?
Well, there's several funny stories. I think I mentioned earlier on about shooting the man in the nose. It wasn't very funny for him. But we did have a production of Hamlet once, and we had a rather camp, drunken stage manager who was kind of, I'm afraid, wedded to the old alcohol. And he played the priest in Hamlet, and his line is, her obsequies have been as far as we have warranted. And he was very funny like that. He was drunk, and it was like this, and he fell into the grave. And underneath him was Hannah Gordon. He was playing Ophelia, and we just heard this, "Boom!" as he hit Hannah. And it was my job and a guy called Gavin Clark, because it was a big set that was built. We had to go under and get him back, and he's going, "Leave me alone, leave me alone, I'm a disgrace, I'm a disgrace." And his body shot. "No, leave me alone, I can't show my face." And about 20 minutes later, we managed to get him out, but that was quite funny.
Oh, I missed that golden age of alcoholism.
Oh dear, I tell you, some drunks have it.
Yes, lady down the front said.
It's all the women I see, there's no men in the audience.
You should be delighted.
No, I'm very happy.
No, and I'm not going all me too and you. I just usually it's the men who ask the questions.
Is it usually the men who ask the questions?
I find it is. Not with you, clearly, Brian.
Sorry, man.
How do you think of my question now? I just want to speak to you.
Oh.
I happen to be married to a Dundonian. And
well, you know, we all have our little cross to bear.
Say they're a breed apart. What is it about Dundonians that is so special?
Well, it's hard to say, really. I think Dundonians are very straight, they're very honest, as my mother would say, you know, when somebody was not being particular, when, you know, my mother would say, "Oh, he's no real," you know, which is persons who are not Dundonians. Because Dundonians are always quite real, you know, there's something about them which is immediate, and I mean, I love the people of Dundee. I mean, I'm very proud. I mean, the city we can argue about, you know, we can argue about what people did to the city, and I grew up during times when they really, you know, there was a big conspiracy to try and turn this into the biggest car park in Europe at one time, and I'm sure there are people here who remember that. But I just think the Dundonians are just they're very warm. They've got this, and there's a lot of Irish influence in Dundee, you know, and you've got Highland influence as well. And also, what I love about Dundee is it's a female town. It's very much a woman's town. And the history of Dundee, the history of Dundee is very much about women. You know, when you think about it, at the time of the mills, something like 80% of the working population were women. I mean, it was a shame for the poor men, because a lot of the men, when they came here, particularly from Ireland, they were known as kettle boilers. And the rate of alcoholism kind of went through the roof, and there was elements, conspiratorial elements, that had contributed to that. But the women were just incredible. I mean, it's extraordinary to note, I don't know if there are any Catholics in the audience, but it's extraordinary to note that it's extraordinary to note that the churches of the St. Patrick's, the cathedral, St. Mary's Lochee, St. Mary's Forbank, those churches were all built by and these people didn't have a pot to piss in, they were really poor. But the Mothers' Union built those churches. They created those churches. And they were able to get, not many people know this, but it was Hanson, of the Hanson Cab, who built St. Mary's Lochee, who designed it, he was the architect. So that sense of what women did for their community was astonishing. You know, when themselves, you know, didn't have very much, they had no money, but they made sure that their places of worship were taken care of. And I think that's what's extraordinary about that, really. And of course those great women breed great children, you know. And something.
front of you. Put your hand up again, sir. Thank you. Thanks.
We very much enjoyed your documentaries on Dundee. Is there material for more, or have you on the history of the rent or something?
Well, I've got a few ideas. There's a guy called William Young, who's a bit of an unsung hero in Dundonian. He was the first movie mogul, and he came from Dundee, and he had an amazing career in the silent films, and he worked right through till the early 50s. He was a producer, and he's quite an extraordinary. I never heard of the guy, and I just heard about him probably in the last 6 months. So there's and I was quite keen on doing that, but then the BBC said we don't want to do anything before 1970. I don't know why that's the break off here, but that's what it is. No, there's a lot of stuff I'd like to do, particularly on the history of this town. Just for example, one of the things I'm also fascinated by is how we finally managed to get the riverfront right. And when you go to the Queen's Hotel, you see these amazing drawings by Patrick Geddes of how they wanted it way back at the beginning of the 20th century. So there's a sort of kind of history there to be looked at as well.
Isn't it interesting the opportunities that open up from being an actor? Thinking about you thinking,
that's what
screwed up your education, and then here you are presenting
right.
to see these excellent
and
documentaries.
I've got 5 doctorates as well, so I mean it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird, that I've got that because, I couldn't spell hardly. But no, I think that I love the documentary. I've done 4 on addiction. And I love it because you go into other worlds where you're learning, you're in a learning state, and that's the great thing about documentaries, and I'd certainly love to do more, a lot more. I'd be very happy doing that.
Thank you very much. Yes?
The gentleman here.
Gentleman here, and then, go. Yes, great.
Okay, right.
Lovely,
Sorry,
thank you.
We'll be with you in a minute. There's a man up. Where is it? Oh, hello.
Yeah, what's it like working with Nicolas Cage?
Said a voice in the dark. He's a very odd fellow. He's a nice fellow. He's quite a shy guy, actually, Nick. And he's great in that film adaptation. I think it's one of his best performances, if not best performance he's given. He's tortured. He comes from the Coppola family. He's Nicholas Coppola, which is his Francis Coppola's nephew, and his father was a composer. But he's complicated. But he's basically very sweet. He's a very sweet guy, but quite a shy guy. I think that's all I have to say about him. The man there. Yeah, and then that man there. That man there.
You're good.
Well, maybe I should take the mic and just go out. We'll be with you in a second. That man there. And then this one here. And this one here first. This one here and then that man there.
Thanks. Very interesting this evening. Thank you very much. I've heard you doing a lot of really, really good American accents. They're really excellent. But you've also done an awful lot of quintessential Scottish characters, like the Rob Roy one, for example, is really excellent. It really makes that movie, actually, that part.
Thank you. Great part. It's a great role.
It's a great role.
It's a great script. I think it's a better script than Braveheart.
You have so you've done really a wide range, but the American accent is really excellent. But do you prefer doing these Scottish characters, and is there any Scottish nationalism within you as well?
Oh, there never used to be, but I'm not sure we should get into a political discussion here because we'll be here all night. No, I mean, I feel very, I mean, my Scottishness is very bland, there's no question. You can take Dundee, you can take the boy out of Dundee, but it's hard to take Dundee out of the boy. And I feel very strongly about the fact that I've come to believe in Scottish independence, which I did. I really did not believe it. I was was very much the opposite camp. But given the state, as the world gets, as the United Kingdom world gets crazier and crazier and crazier, I'm looking for some sensibility, and I'm looking for some kind of really getting back to some values of community which have kind of gone out of our politics altogether. And the one thing I do feel about Nicola Sturgeon is that she's a very straight, honest woman. I mean, they've had their problems, and they still have their problems, because it's very difficult in the moment. But I think this is a very, very difficult time. No, that's not answering your question. Yes, I love playing Scottish characters, and long may I continue to do so, as long as I've got breath. My love, of course, was to do with playing. I mean, as a child, I always talked in an American accent, you know, as a kid, because that was how one played. So it was wonderful for me to be accepted as an American, and so I enjoyed that enormously. America, living in America, it has its problems, as you can imagine. You know, with the man who. Well, I call him the Pink Pinocchio. And you know, he's the, where is it? Very hard, but the people in the Western Isles, from Lewis, is it? His mother comes from. They must be rather difficult for them. So that's hard. That's really hard. I mean, but there's a kind of zeitgeist of disaffection which is happening here and also in the States, and it's also about people who've been ignored in a way, and ignored to the peril of the country at large, both countries at large. And I think we see that. We see that with Brexit, and we certainly see that with what's happening in the move to a more right-wing state in America. It's kind of scary, but it will pass. I'm very confident.
Thank you. I think we have time for maybe
that gentleman there.
Someone with a really upbeat, entertaining question.
Two more questions. That person and that, because it's and give the mic to that man there. That man here, give me the mic. That gentleman first.
Okay, this is a bit of a personal question, Brian. We've never met, and you met my dad. You grew up with my dad a long time ago. He used to tell me lots of stories about you. He was very fond of you and very proud of your achievements.
Thank you.
I've never had a chance to meet you, but we actually have something in common. This is the opportunity for me tonight, because we're probably going to get this opportunity again. But I believe we have the same godmother. And I just wanted to try and clarify that tonight.
It's a very nerve-wracking
I've been living that story all for the last 50 years.
Well, wait a minute. It's just, my godmother has passed.
Yeah. So is mine.
Oh, well, that's all right. Yeah. Peggy? Yes. She was my cousin. She was the McNaughtons are a great family from your street, so I'm from the West End.
My dad's Ronnie McNaughton, who you probably remember.
Oh, well, I've known him well. He was my cousin.
Yeah. he used to tell me that he was always going to appear on This Is Your Life. But it never happened.
No, it never happened. Oh, hiya.
So, thank you very much. Final question.
Well said.
Do you think Dundee is ready for a play, a pie, and a pint?
Always. Very much so. I mean, I think Dundee is very rich. This theatre is amazing, and the work they've been doing in this theatre over the years and the standard that they've maintained is phenomenal. So I actually think I think it's you know, it's fecund territory, you know, not fucking territory. Fecund, you know, F-E-C-U-N-D. You know, and I think that is really wonderful about it, and I think the potential is enormous. And I am proud of the city. I have to warn you though, in the next episode of the thing I do, the guy I'm playing isn't particularly proud of the city. But you must not think that's anything to do with me. That's to do with the writers. It's nothing to do with me.
This is Succession.
Succession. In fact, I'm going to have a word with them tomorrow to say, listen, I can't say that because I've got too many people back there who will not like it. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you very much. I know we could go on and on, but we have to let the staff go home. But thank you very much. I mean, it's just been amazing to see the place packed out. I'm not surprised, though. Remember to share your stories through the 80th anniversary, whatever they are. And please join me in thanking our fabulous guests.
It's great to be home, and it's always great when it's like this. Thanks.
It's overused, isn't it, to talk about being in the somebody's palm, you know, when they're telling stories. And we could have gone all night. We could have gone all night.
No, what time is it? Oh,
it was just fantastic. And Janice, your skill that appears so effortless. Thank you for creating some community here tonight, both of you, because it was just fantastic. Let's give them another big cheer.